Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levy, your guest co-host, James Blissett, Lucrative MMA. Today, we're going to talk about UFC 305, Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya for the undisputed middleweight championship of the world. And my friends, it's going down this Saturday night live at the RAC Arena in Perth, Western Australia. We got one of the greatest middleweights of all time, Izzy Adesanya, trying to be the first man ever to win the middleweight belt 3 times. It's never been done before. Even the great Anderson Silva didn't do that. But he's taken on a serious force in Dricus Du Plessis, who's undefeated in the UFC, who's looking to achieve greatness. It's a stacked card. So without further ado,
let's get down to business. Give you one more night to get this. We've had a million nights just like this. So let's get down to business.
Main event of the evening for the undisputed middleweight title. We got the champ, Dricus Du Plessis, 21-2, taking on the former champ, the former 2-time champ, Israel Adesanya, who's 24-3. And currently, they got it a pick 'em. Just depends where you look. -110 Adesanya, -110 Du Plessis, but in some spots, -115 Adesanya, +100 Du Plessis. James, I mean, it's not often that you see a guy trying to reclaim a belt 3 times, but Izzy is an anomaly. Izzy is a future Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest to ever do it. If someone can pull off a feat like that, it's got to be an extraordinary guy like Izzy Adesanya.
Yeah, you know, I personally don't care too much for the 3-4-time world champ, because honestly, what that tells me is that you lost the belt multiple times, you know, and obviously there is differences like John Jones. He never lost the belt on the octagon, you know, maybe he got injured or something like that, but that's not the same with Izzy. You know, he lost the title twice through in the octagon. So in my opinion, it's more impressive to have never have lost and then just have those as title defenses, you know. But there is another way of looking at it where it's like you're coming back from adversity time and time again, which that can break a lot of people. As soon as you lose the belt, you don't win it again because the game moves on, better fighters are coming up, and, you know, mentally you can't deal with it. Whereas Izzy's got back on the horse multiple times now. So there are 2 ways of looking at it. I personally do value like just never getting beat, which is kind of obvious. I'm not saying anything groundbreaking there, but yeah, man, it definitely is a very exciting fight. I can't wait for it. I'm a big Izzy fan. I've always been an Izzy fan. I know a lot of people don't like him. A lot of people don't like, you know, he paints his nails. He listens to anime. You can't really put him in a box. When people can't put you in a box, they get upset. They start hating, etc., etc. And Izzy has had that, you know, to the 10th degree. But I personally always been a fan. Also living in Auckland, I've seen Izzy personally many times. You know, like Auckland's so small where you'll just be driving down the road. You just see Israel Adesanya, you know, like it's happened to me many times. I've trained in CKB quite a few times as well, so I've been next to him, etc., etc. So just that added level of respect when you see a guy, you know, like live where you live and, you know, take it to the heights he has done. So I'm a fan of his. But I'm a fan of Dricus because he's earned me a lot of money as well, bro. So yeah, ready for this fight. It's going to be a good one, and looking forward to breaking it down.
Yeah, and just how, you know, you're, you know, from the same spot that he's from. Dude, I was at his fight. Look, I got the poster right here with Kelvin Gastelum. It was in Atlanta, Georgia, the night he won the belt. Well, it was really the interim belt, but according to Izzy, don't call it interim. It was the undisputed belt. And then he goes on to unify against Robert Whittaker the first time. So just seeing Izzy's run has been amazing because when he was first coming up, man, it was like, this is like the next Anderson Silva, because Anderson Silva was always the gold standard at middleweight, right? Like we had never seen anything like that before. And that performance that Izzy had against Brad Tavares was like, yo, this is the first time I've seen Matrix type qualities since the Anderson Silva days. And what's so unique about this matchup is that Dricus, it's the complete opposite. There's nothing pretty about his game. In fact, if you watch tape on Dricus, you might convince yourself like, damn, like this is ugly. There's so many openings. Like this guy might not even be that good. But the tape is deceiving when it comes to Dricus Du Plessis because it might be ugly, it might be awkward, but goddamn, is it effective? And is it violent? Does he hit hard? The guy's a tank, and he just won't be denied. To me, this fight comes down to the distance it's played at. If we're playing kicking range with Izzy Adesanya, you're gonna get picked apart. If you want to have a pretty kickboxing fight, I mean, go ahead and give Izzy his third title, his third title reign at middleweight, but that's not the kind of guy Dricus is. Dricus fights ugly. He's got to just fight like himself. Get in Izzy's face, pin him up against the fence, roughneck him, mix in takedowns. Even if you can't get the takedowns, the threat of the takedown should be there. But I do think you can get takedowns, James. I mean, Alex Pereira got a takedown, a nice little blast double. He turned the corner and everything. Beautiful technique. I think if he can do it, I definitely think Dricus can, but one takedown doesn't mean the fight's over shortly after. And we have seen, for example, in the Darren Till fight, he was dominating early in that fight. Like, he got him down right away, beating his head in, and then he kind of gassed a little bit. Now, do you think it's a case where, because they made a big deal about the nose surgery, like, is he truly breathing better and all that stuff, or is it just always going to look awkward when this guy fights? Because, I mean, look at him, right?
Yeah, I don't know. When did he apparently have that surgery? Was it before the Strickland fight?
So it was right before the Whitaker fight, and then he knocks him out with a jab.
Yeah, I don't look much into that, because if you see through Dricus's career, like, he always has a good third round, even with Tavares, which was the fight, one of the first fights of his UFC reign. His nose was mashed up then, but he did gas out. But then he came back heavy in the third round. And Derek Brunson, before the surgery, he finished him in round 2. I think it's just one of those things where he gets a second wind. He pushes through very well. He's got a lot of muscle, so he's always going to look a little bit tired, look a little bit weathered, look a little bit labored. And also how awkward he is, it looks worse. It sometimes he's tired just because of how janky. Sometimes he looks tired from the first minute just because of how awkward he's walking. He's not fluid, so he looks a little bit tired. So I don't really put too much stock in that. It could be though, but I think he just pushes through well.
Yeah, and I mean, the dude pushes a pace. So whether he's breathing hard or not, like, he's going to go for it. And the only time he's lost, I mean, we can bring up the Gareth McClellan fight when he was like a teenager, but to me, that was, he was a teenager. But I guess the Soldich fight, he fought Soldich twice, knocked him out once, got knocked out by him once. Listen, that's part of the game. Like, this guy's fighting real guys on his regional scene, comes to the UFC. I mean, goes undefeated, makes it to the belt. Now he's got his first title defense. And this is a grudge match, man. I loved that buildup when Izzy walked into the cage. He's like, "What's up, my African brother?" Like, dude, that shit got me so pumped up. And like, this is an Africa versus Africa super fight for me. I've been wanting to see this fight for so long. I was worried when Izzy fought Strickland. I was worried when Dricus fought Strickland because I thought it was going to ruin the eventuality of this fight coming to fruition. But here we are, Saturday night. They're going to run it, and I don't give a shit if Izzy's coming off a loss where he didn't just lose, James. He got dominated pillar to post 4 out of the 5 rounds, my man. I don't care if he's coming off that loss and he's getting an immediate title shot. I have to see this fight. This is the Africa versus Africa super fight that I've been wanting to see for years. And James, I got to bet on this fight. I took Dricus Du Plessis plus 110. Listen, I know it's tough to bet against a guy like Israel Adesanya, a guy who I hold in such high regard. But when we come down to the stylistics, like I mentioned, closing the distance, getting right in his face, fighting not at kicking range, I think that's going to be one thing. But then you look at the narratives of, I mean, how many times can you climb that mountain? And then this really has nothing to do with anything. But if you want to maybe confirm your bias a little bit, that maybe Izzy's kind of checking out. Have you seen some of the interviews he's been doing lately where like he doesn't even turn his camera on? Like I had like a real like legit reporter, like one of the most well-known guys in the MMA space. I'm not going to name his name, but he privately DM'd me and he said they couldn't even broadcast his interview with Izzy on their network because he wouldn't turn his camera on. And he did this with multiple guys, like with MMA Junkie, with the Canada network. Like, I'm like, dude, you can't turn your camera on. So, and everything he's saying sounds rehashed, sounds like, yeah, going through the motions. Again, James, this is speculative. This is narrative. This doesn't matter. To me, what matters is I'm getting the champ at plus 110. I did my job. Now he's minus money, beat the line. And for a second, title week in a row, I'm taking the underdog, to have gold around their waist. Bilal Muhammad, now Dricus Du Plessis, plus 110. I put 2 units on it. And I hope he fights at the range that's appropriate for him, which is very up close and makes it dirty.
Similar to the Bilal Muhammad fight in some regard as well. If it was going to be outside kickboxing fight in the Bilal fight, he was going to lose. But he got in his face. He made it dirty. He made it gritty. I do think Dricus is going to be able to do that. What decides where the fight takes place, like what range the fight takes place? It really comes down to athleticism, explosiveness, footwork, range control, and reflexes. Those are the main 5 things that decide the range in what you're going to fight at, right? You could have amazing footwork, but like if the guy is such a better athlete than you, he might just be able to close distance. If he's a good athlete, but he has terrible footwork, you might just be able to dance on the outside, right? And like a lot of those things cancel each other out, but a lot of those things come down to your age. A lot of those things come down to how many miles you have in the sport. You know, your reflexes are not the same at 36, 37 that they are at 32, 33. They're just not. Your athleticism is not the same, right? So I think that Izzy's getting older at this point in time. And I think I said to you privately, we don't speak that often about fights, but I did say to you privately that I think prime Izzy smokes prime DDP. And I truly believe that. You know, I think this is 5 years ago for Israel Adesanya. I think he wins this fight cleanly, but he's been in the sport for a long time. He's got beat in the middleweight division multiple times now, you know, which we had never seen before he got knocked out against Alex. So that's something to take note of. He's lost multiple fights. He's coming off a loss in a fight where I think prime Izzy smokes Sean Strickland. I truly do. You know, you could just say, oh, it was just an off night for Izzy, but why was it an off night? Was it an off night because it was a random off night? Or was it an off night because he's getting older and he got knocked out against Alex and he's took a lot of punishment and he's just not the same fighter as he was? Would he have had the off night 5 years ago? I personally don't believe it. I think Izzy's mind is there. And like my friend, my mate Danny, he is the main training partner for Israel Adesanya, replicating Dricus Du Plessis this camp, right? So I know a lot about Izzy's training camp through him this for the last few weeks. And I'm not going to say too much about how the camp went, etc., etc. But what I will say is that Izzy mentally is there, right? Now, if you want to talk about like if he's over angry or over emotional and stuff, I'm not talking about that stuff. Like at the end of the day, no one knows that apart from himself, right? But in terms of mentally dialed into training, like turning up to all training sessions, going harder than everyone else, like leaving no stone unturned. I know for a fact 100% he's been doing all that. But is his body physically there? You know, is his body able to keep up with the mind? Even without knowing anything about his camp. I haven't seen it over the last 2-3 years. I've seen him slow down against fighters like Alex and against Strickland. And Dricus Du Plessis is not slowing down, man. He's getting better and better and better and better. Because, you know, he had some shaky performances in the octagon, but I do believe he's gone from strength to strength. You know, I can't remember who it was, but I think it may have been a boxing trainer where he says, once you win the title, you become 10% better. You know, just
I thought it was 30%.
Yeah, I know. I think it was higher than 10%, you know, but I don't know exactly what it was. But you get better once you win the title. And I believe that's, you know, for some people, obviously not. But for the most part, yeah, definitely. You know, you have a little bit more confidence about you. And I don't think Dricus is overconfident. You know, I haven't really seen that. I don't think he's the type of guy to be overconfident. He knows every fight is a tough fight. He approaches each fight the same. Dricus always comes in there ready to bang. He always comes in there ready to go. He always comes in there making mistakes, but still winning the fight. Like, he's never having a really good performance, then a really bad performance. That's not really how he goes, right? Apart from maybe Whitaker was like his standout performance. But I think that stylistically, because we spoke about some of the intangibles, the age, the camp, etc. Now, stylistically, because I always say 3 ways to cap a fight, Dan. Stylistically, statistically, and then the intangibles. So stylistically, I think Dricus has outs to win the fight. You know, obviously, prime for prime, I do think stylistically, Izzy is a good matchup. You know, it's a good matchup for Izzy, but he still has to deal with a lot of wrestling, to which he hasn't really had to deal with in the UFC. If you go back, what wrestlers has he fought? Derek Brunson, Marvin Vettori. I mean, Vettori's not really a wrestler.
Vettori took him down too, by the way.
Yeah, 4 times. 4 times in that second fight. And in the first fight, if I'm not mistaken, he won the 3rd round via grappling.
It was a split decision, the first fight.
Yeah, which it shouldn't have been a split decision. I thought it was a kind of clear 2-1, but he won a round cleanly with wrestling. The second fight, he kind of got styled on. He still got his back. He had the hooks in at one point, and he hasn't faced many wrestlers. You know, Derek Brunson, he knocked him out super early. We can't take too much from that in terms of the wrestling. Obviously, Izzy has beautiful wrestling defense, but up against the cage, in the middle of the octagon, is not that good. And once the reflexes start going, once you get a little bit older, once your athleticism dips by 20%, it's even harder to defend takedowns, especially on the inside, on the middle of the cage. So, I think Dricus Du Plessis can hurt him on the feet because Strickland hurt him on the feet. Alex hurt him on the feet. Kelvin hurt him on the feet. I mean, the guy's been hurt on the feet multiple times. Dricus hurts everyone on the feet multiple times. Fights he's hurting people 2 or 3 times. He's got a lot of power. So he has outs to win the fight via knockout. And he has the out, via striking. And he has outs to win the fight via grappling. So, yeah, I think it's a perfect storm. And I think Dricus is going to win the fight. But it's going to be a good fight. Like, obviously, I think Adesanya still has a chance to win the fight. He's one of the greatest middleweights of all time. I'm not, like, as I'm making a passionate breakdown on why Izzy's maybe old and past it and all of that. But don't mistake me, anyone watching this fight. I'm not saying this is a guaranteed lock bet. I am saying I think Dricus Du Plessis is going to retain the belt and be the first person to do it in a long, long time. The belt's just been switching hands for years now. So I think Dricus is going to establish himself as the best middleweight in the world against all odds, because he was getting ripped when he first came into the UFC. And he's an underdog again, yet again.
Yeah, I mean, again, comes down to the distance for me. Izzy obviously has a chance. He's one of the greatest. You fight Izzy in a pretty kickboxing fight, you might get knocked out, you might get picked apart, but make it dirty. And then, like you said, when I started this breakdown 15 minutes ago, who did I compare Izzy to? Anderson Silva. What happened when Anderson Silva started to decline? Yeah. Speed, athleticism, agility is the first thing to go with a guy like that who's so reliant on those reflexes. Like, we're not talking about a Dan Henderson who is always kind of been kind of slow, but he's got the H-bomb. And it doesn't matter if he's 22 or 42. If he lands that thing on the button, you're going to the 5th dimension. But with Izzy's style, similar to the great Anderson, when they get over the hill, all of a sudden, that head movement starts to slow down. You fight with your hands down, relying on reflexes and all that pretty movement. And once that slows down just a step, these guys that you would have been miles ahead of in your prime now are starting to catch up to you. And in this case, I think are going to surpass you. So I'm going and still, and let's see what happens, James. Now, co-main event of the evening in the flyweight division, we got Kai Kara France. He's 24-11, taking on Steve Erceg, who's 12-2. And currently, they got it. Steve Erceg minus 155. The comeback on Kai Kara France is plus 135. So a lot of actions coming on France, and I get why. I mean, I think this is going to be a really close competitive fight, but like Erceg was like minus 210, and people were out here parlaying him. Now he's minus 155. So I think a lot of sharp action is coming on France. So I released my contender series video yesterday, and someone commented that James Blissett looks like Steve Erceg. So I'm going to let you take this one first.
Yeah, I get Steve Erceg. I get Carlos Condit the most.
Amir Khani.
Who? Yeah, Amir Khani as well, which is a weird one. I don't know. I get a lot of people, but I think I've got a good chance to win the fight this weekend. I mean, obviously, when you look at Kai Kara France, he's basically a striker. He's not really doing much with the grappling. He's never really winning fights with the grappling. He's got very good defensive grappling. I remember when I played him at plus 300 against Askar Askarov. Shout out to his defensive grappling. I think a lot of people started realizing who he was after that fight. And, I played him in his last fight because of his defensive grappling against Amir Albazi in a fight I thought he clearly won. I actually thought 4-1 was a better scorecard than 3-2 Albazi, but he lost it. My opinion, it was a robbery. I don't use that word too often, but I don't think you can give Albazi 3 rounds. But anyway, so like, he's going to strike in this fight, right? But Erceg is the one who has the grappling upside if he has any at all. The thing about Erceg is, like, he's a bit tricky with his grappling. He's not going to shoot double legs and single legs like Askar Askarov. He might just get you in a body lock and throw you down, or get a whizzer and trip you that way. Or he's got some decently tricky trips and throws that may catch Kai Kara France off guard here. Because I understand, people are going to be like, well, Askar couldn't grapple him. Albazi didn't do too much apart from 1 round. Like, I doubt Erceg's going to grapple him. It's going to be a striking fight. Kai Kara shouldn't be a big underdog, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Erceg get some top time here. I wouldn't be surprised to see Erceg get some grappling control. On the feet, I think is a very close fight. I'd actually say Steve Erceg probably has the better boxing, but Kai Kara France is the much well-rounded striker overall. He's got better feints. I think he sets up his shots better. I think his leg kicks, head kicks, body kicks are better. His footwork is better. He's the much more well-rounded striker, but this is an MMA fight. It's definitely different. The thing about Kai Kara France is, like, he's been off for a long time now, right? And don't know how he's going to perform coming back. I also don't know how Erceg's going to perform coming back off a title loss, right? That's a big thing that we have to mention. I think my man Clint mentioned it yesterday when I went on his podcast, where fighters coming off a title loss, they often lose their next fight. We saw Marlon Vera lose against Davison Figueiredo last time out. And we do see it time and time again. They reach the top of the hill, and it's very hard mentally to now go and fight someone who's maybe only in the top 5 or only in the top 10, such as Steve Erceg, you know? So that's what we have to, such as Kai Kara-France, sorry. You know, you go from Pantoja to Kai Kara-France. Kai doesn't really have a name outside of the hardcores. So, you know, maybe mentally that's something we have to take into account. But Steve Erceg's very young in the career. He feels like he potentially could have won that fight. I don't think it's like this massive moment where he's got to come down from it. It was, I don't know if it was a short notice fight. I think it might have been a short notice fight. And like, he wasn't even in the run-in. It was kind of random. They only gave it to him because no one else could fight. And Makayev didn't perform well. And Cape, you know, pulled out of the fight because of the weight miss against Perez or whatever, who he was meant to fight, Nicoll. So I don't think it's going to affect him too much mentally. I'm going to go with Erceg. I just feel like trajectory-wise, he's the side here. And, you know, it's funny because like a week ago, if I was on his podcast, I probably would have picked Kai Kara-France. Reason being is because he was a big underdog. And I'm a gambler, so the odds do influence they don't influence my outright pick, but they do influence the breakdown I give, right? If Erceg is minus 10,000, I'm going to give a passionate breakdown for Kai Kara-France. If Kai Kara-France is minus 10,000, I'm going to give a passionate breakdown for Erceg, even though my analysis on the fight is the exact same, right? So you have to understand when you're listening to my breakdowns that I'm giving the plus EV side a little bit more of the shine when I'm speaking about the fight. I can say, I know Kai Kara-France has been training very hard, and a lot of people, you know, have been wondering what's he been doing over the last 1.5 years he's been off. He's been training all the time. You don't have to worry about him not training. So he's definitely been training, because I know he's got clothing lines out and stuff now. So, you know, if you are thinking about betting on Kai or betting against him and wondering, but what's he been doing that long? I know for a fact he's been training very hard, but he is getting older in his career now. How old is he, Dan? Do you know how old Kai is?
He was born in 93 and Erceg was born in 95. So,
okay, so
whatever that means.
So he's 31 years old. So they're a similar age. You got like 29 against 31. But, you know, he's been in the game for a long time. Kai Kara-France been fighting good fighters for a long, long time, man. He fought someone in an octagon on a ship. I don't know if you know that, on a cruise ship. Back in the day, I don't even know how I know that. It's just a piece of information I have in my brain. I think it's a fighter that was in the UFC as well. But anyway, he's been fighting a long time, long career. Erceg's only just started his career in reality, like in terms of the high-level fights, the media. So I think that's going to go in his favor. I'm picking Steve Erceg, but it's going to be a close fight. I think he can grind out a 29-28 with the grappling upside or something like that. If the line keeps on shooting down, I might have to look into him, because I do think he's a very good fighter and evolving each fight. So coming back off that Pantoja fight, he might, you know, even step up again, not drop down. So, yeah, that's my breakdown. I think Erceg wins.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me, man, because Erceg, dude, just 3 fights in, title shot off the rip. Like, you didn't really get to see him, you know, truly tested. I mean, I say that. He was tested in the Alessandro Costa fight and in the Pantoja fight. You know, I guess that is the champ. So, but I do think he's being a little overrated off that performance. Like, Pantoja is a guy that, you know, his nickname is the Cannibal. Like, that's because, like, he goes life and death with guys and eventually he breaks them. But like Pantoja, he doesn't cleanly beat everybody he fights. Like, there's a lot of fights where he'll lose some rounds because his style is very taxing. All those back takes, that shit gasses out your legs, man. And there's a reason why people win rounds off Pantoja. But Pantoja, obviously the best flyweight on planet Earth, he can win the majority of the fight. But like, having moments against him doesn't tell me that, oh man, Erceg's going to come out here and smoke the rest of the division, because tons of guys have had moments against Pantoja. I mean, Kai Kara-France had moments against Pantoja too. I don't know if you remember, they fought on Tough. I'm pretty damn sure off the top of my head, Kai Kara-France won the first round and then Pantoja broke him in the second and third. And what's interesting about that is it kind of reminds me of a fight that Kai Kara-France had with this dude named Raulian Paiva. So you were talking about the Albazi fight potentially being a robbery. Man, I thought low-key that Raulian Paiva Kai Kara-France fight might have been a bit of a robbery. I thought Raulian might have actually low-key got that. And the reason I bring that up is because Erceg kind of has that similar body type. He's like 5'8" at flyweight, which that's basically like being 6 feet tall at flyweight. 5'8" is a tall dude at 125, and like Paiva was like 5'9", so like they got that similar kind of long frame. And what I've seen from Erceg, I mean, it looks like he's a thinking man's fighter, right? It looks like his boxing is pretty polished. Looks jiu-jitsu black belt, looks pretty decent everywhere, smart guy. In France, he's a small guy, 5'4", so he has to, like, to be that small and be successful, you have to be smart. He has a lot of good in and out. I love his footwork. I like his combinations. His defense has always been really damn good. The issues I've had with France is that back in the day, I thought that he's a guy that if you stand up to him, he can kind of break in fights. But I feel like, dude, he's kind of gotten over that. Like, if you would have told me the guy that fought Holly and Paiva was going to fight for UFC titles and #1 contender fights, I would have said, yeah, right, dude. And he surpassed my expectations. So Kara France has all my respect. Dude, I really think this is a dogger pass situation. Like, it's a tough one. Like, Erceg has to be long, has to keep him at the end of that jab, but like France knows how to fight that style. So I don't know, dude. I see this being a split decision type fight. And in instances like that, I think you got to go with the dog. So even though the lines come down a lot, I actually agree with the I don't know if it's sharp action or public action, but I agree with the action that's brought this line down from, let's see what it's come down from. So it went from plus 180, James, all the way to plus 135. I think people made a smart move there. Like, I'm not guaranteeing he wins. Obviously, you can't guarantee shit, but I really think it's going to be a close fight, man. I mean, like, even his fight with Moreno, dude, like, those first 2 rounds were super close.
Yeah.
The Albazi fight, whether you think it's a robbery or not, the stats say it was a robbery. Everyone's opinion says it was a robbery. I personally thought it was a really close fight when I watched it live. Maybe need to go back and rewatch. But even with all that said, a split decision type fight, you take the underdog. So you just have to conclude that is not a split decision type fight to take Erceg, in my opinion. If you truly believe Erceg is going to come out here, pick this man apart, and that Kai is maybe slowing down a little bit, kind of like the rest of the city kickboxer guys, because let's face it, like, people get older, you know what I'm saying? So like, I hear people talking about, oh, this gym fell off and that gym fell off, and oh, Fortis MMA fell off, oh, city kickboxing fell off. They didn't fall off, just their fighters got older. Like that's all that happens. So if Kai is on a decline, and at flyweight, it'll show if you're on a decline, because this is the most technical weight class and the fastest weight class in the entire sport. So if Kai is truly on a decline, it's going to show right away. But until I see that, obviously, look, the concussion talk is a concern, but that's narrative. But on the other side, coming off a title loss is a concern. And his strength of schedule is a concern, dude. Like, David Dvorak, Costa's the best guy he beat in that run. Matt Schnell, like, you got a title shot off beating Matt Schnell. I get it. Thin division, but I'm just not as sold on Erceg as everyone else is. I think that he's a legit top 10 guy, but is he a top 5 guy? We'll find out Saturday night. I'm going Kai Kara France via split decision.
Yeah, man, I feel you, bro. I was going to play him at plus 180, and then it came down, and I'm like, I don't really want to get involved at this point, because I really do rate Erceg. I bet him against Pantoja. I bet him in his debut against Dvorak. I have an affinity towards Erceg. I really like him. So I'm not in the business too often of fading guys I really like and who I think are improving. But I was going to play him at plus 180, so that tells you what you need to know. I know that the one thing we have to mention is that Erceg made me go crazy when he fought against Pantoja. Fight IQ was like out the window in that fight. In round 5, he had the fight won. The fight was won, bro, and he engaged in the grappling. After doing it for 4 rounds and losing every single time he did it, he shot a takedown in round 5. It was one of the worst decisions I've ever seen in a title fight in MMA history. And I know everyone loves Erceg, and, you know, you call him a thinking man's fighter, and I do believe he's got high fight IQ, and like, I think he's smart and all of this stuff, and, you know, everyone likes him. But at the end of the day, let's call a spade a spade. One of the worst decisions ever. I don't know why he made it. I'm not in there, right? So, okay, you can say, oh, but you're not in there. It's different in there. Whatever. That was a stupid decision, terrible decision, horrific fight IQ. It lost him the title. So maybe he makes a bad decision this time out against Kai Kara France. And, you know, you say like concussion narrative, and you haven't seen him slowing down, right? I know that athletically and physically, he's not slowed down in the training room. He's performing to the top that he's ever performed. I know that for a fact. I've been told. And do you know the bleep test? Have you ever heard of the bleep test?
Remind me what it is again.
The bleep test is like something we used to do at school. They do it in CKB in some gyms where like you'll run from one side of the gym to the other side of the gym, and you have to make it before the speaker beeps. It makes a beeping noise, and every minute the beep gets faster and faster. And then obviously when you don't make it to the other side before the beep goes, you lose. And then however many beeps you made, that's your score. Cara France wins the bleep test and won it recently out of everybody in the gym. So there's 50 fighters and he's the number one, right? The number one athletic, number one. He's always like winning all of those type of competitions. And this is the lowest weight he's ever been prior to the weigh-in in his entire career. So take all of that from what maybe it means nothing, but to me, it means that he's physically top, performing tip-top shape. So, we'll leave it at that. I'm going to pick Erceg to win the fight, but I do think it's going to be close, like you say.
Featured bout in the lightweight division, we got Mateusz Gamrot. He's 24-2, taking on Dan Hooker, who's 23-12. Currently, they got it. Mateusz Gamrot minus 350. The comeback on Hooker is plus 275. So, listen, I think Mateusz Gamrot has probably one of the best low single games in MMA. Like, you don't often see guys going for low singles. Like, I remember when Randy Couture fought James Toney and he went for that low single, but you don't often see it against, actual like MMA fighters, right? So to see a guy make that style work at 155 and you get to the top 10, respect, man. But like, okay, I want you to let me know if I'm out of line here. Why do I kind of think that Mateusz Gamrot is low-key on a decline, dude? Like, I thought that he did not cover his minus 500 or whatever the price tag was against RDA. In fact, didn't RDA almost knock him out in round 1? And I bet on Gamrot in the Fiziev fight, and it was an injury, but I kind of felt like it was starting to trend towards our direction. But man, I just have big concerns about Gamrot on the feet. Like, I know he can crack. Like, you saw the Holtzman fight, he can crack. But the technique and sometimes the optics are just not very good. Like, look at the Guram fight. Like, he could have easily won that fight, right? Some people think it was a robbery, but the reason that Guram got it was because of the optics. Like, Gamrot looks so desperate when he's shooting for those low singles. And then with Hooker, I was convinced he was on his way out too, James. And now he's on a little, somewhat of a resurgence. I don't know if you want to call it that, but it looks like, I don't want to make any accusations, but like, dude, his physique has changed. Not only has, like when their physique changes, but like then they get that tan too. Like, how the hell do you go from being the whitest dude alive to now like you got a tan, a 6-pack, you're ripped like it's no one's fucking business? Like, hey man, no USADA is a beautiful thing. And Gamrot shoots a sloppy ass low single on Hooker. I mean, Hooker's got those long man chokes waiting for him. Like, it's been a while since he's hit one of those guillotines, but back in the day, I mean, they call him the hangman. I mean, about that hangman choke. Like, this dude does have some long man chokes, and I would not be surprised if he caught Mateusz and something like that, or a knee up the middle, the same knee he knocked out Jim Miller, Ross Pearson with. That knee up the middle used to be a vicious weapon. My issue I've had with Hooker over the years is that Hooker gets hit way too much. Hooker's striking defense is like reliant on his chin. But the thing is, Gamrot doesn't throw like that. Gamrot doesn't have that volume to really expose that. So to me, it's like, okay, now it comes down to the wrestling defense. Let's take a gander at what's been happening the last few times that Hooker's faced anyone that's tried. So Turner did take him down, and then prior to that, the last guy to take him down was Islam. But if you look at that Jalen fight, it was Hooker that was closest to finishing on the mat. I mean, he had a locked-in Mata Leon rear naked choke. I think it was the end of round 2, and like, dude, 2 more seconds on the clock, it's either tap or nap. Like, that was game, set, and match. So, what do you think? Because like, is it truly 2 guys on their way out? Was RDA just, a tough stylistic matchup for Gamrot? And maybe I'm overblowing that because he was like minus 500. It didn't look like he covered it at all. Or am I on to something that this guy is one-dimensional as hell and people have maybe figured out his style a bit?
Yeah, so I'll just tell you my history of Mateusz Gamrot. I played him against Scott Holtzman at like minus 190 back in the day. I also played him against someone else. Plus 250, plus 200 against Arman Sarukian in a fight which I thought he lost.
It was a great fight, though.
Yeah, very good fight. He pushed very well late, which is impressive. But again, liability on the feet. He was getting kicked the fuck, and he did not know what to do in kicking range. He just had no idea what to do. And then I switched on Gamrot a little bit. It's nothing personal, just betting. And I bet on Jalen Turner to beat him at plus 190. And I thought it was a good bet at plus 190. It was a split decision. One judge scored it for Jalen Turner. I personally thought he had an argument on damage. I did think they would give it to Mateusz, but I thought it was a 50-50 fight, Dan, honestly. Like 55, if you want to say. Like, there's no way Gamrot was minus 230 or whatever. I faded in that spot. So I went back to the well and I played Fiziev against him. That didn't go well. Fiziev popped his knee or something happened. I personally think Gamrot was like winning that fight and he looked like he was going to win the fight. But we never really know. I mean, like, you never know. It was a 5-round fight. I'm pretty sure it was a 5-round fight. Like, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. Like, I personally do think he was probably just going to break Fiziev. It seemed like his pace and pressure was doing well. But who knows, right? And then, like, because at the end of the day, all it takes is one, man. Gamrot gets cracked. He's been dropped multiple times. Like, Fiziev can crack. All it takes is one. And then I played RDA plus 400, plus 350. It was a big number, Dan. It was definitely had a 3 next to it. 350, 310 or something. And I thought it was the bet of the century when he knocked him down in round 1, right? And then obviously he just got grappled. He's an old dude or whatever. And I'm looking at it again, and again, he's like minus 250, minus 300. I mean, I keep betting against him when he's this massive favorite. I keep getting very close. I mean, RDA almost had him. Fiziev, we can't count it too much. Jalen Turner almost had him. And now we got Dan Hooker, who is a way better striker than him, who's going to do all the damage on the feet, who has most of the finishing upside. I mean, it's not often, Dan, we get a minus 300 who has way less finishing upside than his opponent. We don't see that too often in MMA, where all the finishing upside is on the other guy. So that's something to take note of. If there is a finish, I probably expect it to come from Hooker. But I guess the Islam Makhachev fight is scaring me a little bit. Like, Gamrot's got a decent Kimura, man. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him hit it. He hit it on Jeremy Stevens. He's a strong dude. He's going to be in top position in this fight, throughout the fight at times. He's going to get top position. I don't think he has amazing control, but he can definitely cinch in a Kimura or something like that. I just don't know how good Hooker is with the grappling defense, I know he's good with the takedown defense and stuff, but when he's actually put on his back, what has he got there? I don't really know. So, because we haven't seen it that much in MMA. We haven't really seen it on the octagon too much, which is kind of crazy because he's got so many fights in multiple weight classes, but we just haven't really seen him with someone who's decent at jiu-jitsu on top of him for too long. So yeah, I'm still going back and forth with this one. It may be another donation that I make against the Gamrot fund, but I might just pass on this one. Personally, I'm picking Gamrot to win. I think he's going to win a decision where in one round he's dropped, he gets kicked with a body kick, he gets dropped, but then he gets that ankle pick, takes him down, and it's just, he rides out the rest of the round, and I'm screaming at the TV. So yeah, I'm going to take some time to think about this one. Maybe I end up playing Hooker. I think it's a dog or pass. You can't lay this juice on Gamrot, but I've thought that throughout almost his entire career, to be honest. So nothing's changed there. So yeah, I think Gamrot wins.
A little stat for you. Gamrot's been dropped in 4 of his last 5 fights. And the one that he wasn't dropped in was the Fiziev fight that ended via injury. So
yeah,
all he gets dropped. Like, I'm telling you, man, he is for a top 10 lightweight. He's very, very sloppy and it looks desperate. That's why, I so agree with you that it's going to be a minus EV win for Gamrot, where like you said, Hooker fucks him up, but then gets on his back. And and you're like, man, we were so close to knocking him out. Now we're laying on our back for 3 straight minutes. That kind of ordeal. So sure, I'll pick Gamrot as a pure pick. But if I am to bet this fight, it's dog or pass. It's just like, how much do I trust Hooker? Because Hooker has historically been a guy that I like to bet against. It's like 2 guys that I respect. Obviously, they're 2 staples. They've been around a long time. They're ultra vets, but I've always kind of bet against these guys. I say that I bet on Gamrot in the Fizzy fight and maybe got lucky, but who knows? But yeah, Gamrot, but split decision. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
Hooker's probably gonna have moments.
It seems that way. And, you know, like you said earlier, Hooker was known for being washed. 1 year ago, Hooker was washed. He was completely done. You know, one of the worst full loss we've ever seen. And now people, from what I'm speaking to, are like, man, Hooker could win this fight. But at the end of the day, the betting line isn't reflecting it. They're still pricing him like he is washed. So, you know, maybe most people do actually think he's still washed. Just because he had a resurgence against Jalen Turner doesn't mean he's physically and mentally not really all there. But yeah, we'll see. I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
He took a shitload of damage in that fight, but Gamrot can't dish the damage that Jalen can dish. It's different, you know. Jalen dished that damage to Gamrot as well. So yeah. All right. Now, next up in the heavyweight division, we got a banger between Tuivasa. He's 14-7, taking on Jairzinho. Rozenstruik, who's 14-5. Currently, they got it. Jairzinho -220. The comeback on Tuivasa is +185. I mean, I think the line reflects just the momentum that Jairzinho has coming off his most recent win and the fact that Ty is coming off a bunch of losses. But the reality is these two are going to stand and bang until one man falls. Either that or they're going to be kind of hesitant because they respect each other's power. But I highly doubt there's going to be a bunch of takedown attempts or any shit like that. I think either they're going to bang it out or they're going to kind of stare at each other. But no matter what, I think it's taking place on the feet. You can never count out Ty, man. I mean, Ty can bang. Ty, he's got kind of the new school Mark Hunt style. You already know what he brings to the table. Big left hook, big leg kicks, elbows off the break. If you've watched Mark Hunt, you know exactly what Ty Tuivasa brings to the table. On the other side with Rozenstruik, a bit more patient, you know, likes to have those kick returns, that leaping left hook. It's tough, man. I mean, I think that Rozenstruik's at a better place, but the line clearly reflects that with it being -220. He's coming off a win, so there's recency bias involved. But like a fight like this, there's a lot of randomness involved because these two have the potential to knock each other out. So I get why someone would take the shot on Tuivasa, but then you go back to the kind of narrative talk. Tuivasa is, you know, growing weed now, which, hey, man, dude, you've made so many 50K bonuses. You're the fucking man. Everybody loves you. Even if you lose this fight, you're not getting cut. You're tied to Tuivasa. You're Shuivasa, bro. Like, you're the man. Like, we'll hook him up with a Huntsucker type guy after this, James. Like, it's all good, Ty. You are sticking around, my boy. Has Ty ever shot for a takedown in his UFC career? Let me check, because like, you know how they feel about that, right?
Yeah, I think maybe like when he's hurt against
No. Hey, James, takedown average 0, takedown accuracy 0. This man has never shot for a takedown in his UFC career. So you can go ahead and lose your next 10 in a row. You're sticking around, my boy, just because of how you fight. But James, it's so tough to pick a guy that's been finished 4 fights in a row. I know, against legit competition, but you just have to question where he's at. And it could be narrative, but I don't think 4 finished losses in a row is narrative. So I'm gonna go with Jairzinho, but like I've seen Jairzinho get slept more than once. Is it gonna surprise me if he gets slept here? Not at all, but pure pick, I'm gonna agree with him being the favorite here.
Yeah, Clint said something good yesterday where, you know, he said that it's kind of the range thing, like what you said about the main event. You know, if this fight is in close range, Ty becomes a -110. You know, but Jairzinho, if he can time him, if he keeps it like a little bit outside range, he's probably the much better striker, the much cleaner striker. He has better cardio, all of that stuff. And it does kind of come down to what you say. Is he there mentally? Because I don't know if he was listening, but I told this story on Clint's podcast. I met Ty Tuivasa like a couple of months ago, around 2 months ago, on May the 30th, actually, which is my birthday. I met him on my birthday. I was eating in a restaurant. He walked past. We kind of looked eyes. I think he saw I was looking at him. I was like, "Is that fucking Ty Tuivasa?" And anyway, you know, I've told the story already. I won't go too in depth. But basically, I started talking to him for a bit. He looked like he was enjoying himself, and that was in Bangkok, right? So Bangkok, you know, what happens in Bangkok stays in Bangkok.
Enjoying yourself in Bangkok is different than enjoying yourself here, my friends.
Yeah, exactly. So you already know what I'm saying, but it stays in Bangkok, so I won't mention it. But it's nothing crazy, but he was enjoying himself, right? He's having a very good time. He was in this restaurant, they have a bar downstairs. Yeah, he was having a good time, just like I was. And that was 2 months ago. So, you know, the maximum camp he's had is the day after that. And I know he didn't fly back the day after that, because about a week after, I saw him getting his face boxed off by Alex Pereira in the USA or somewhere, right? So then he went to America. So, I mean, he's probably had at maximum a 6-week camp for this, at very maximum, which maybe it's all right for Tuivasa, because the guy ain't really coming in with this massive game plan where he needs, 12 weeks to work on a game plan, and he's got all of these new tricks, these new takedowns he's adding in. He's going to go out there and swang and bang, right? He probably doesn't need that much of a camp. So maybe it won't even matter. But I can say that I am a little bit worried about if he's there mentally. He's been finished multiple times in a row now. I don't think he's had a long camp for this one. He's got a different business now where he's selling weed. He's selling weed in America in the legal states and in Thailand. They're called Bam Bam Buds. So go and check those out when they drop. Dan, maybe have a joint where I don't know if they're
Ty, if you're listening, hook me up, bro.
So, he's got all of this other stuff going on outside the octagon. He's a very big star in Australia as well. A lot of people know him. He's on interviews and stuff. So you have to always worry about that. But at the end of the day, it's a heavyweight fight. So all of that shit matters less, because they only need to land one. They don't need to be in the fight for 15 minutes and be focused and land 100 punches. They only need to be focused for 1 second. So all of that shit matters less. And I do think stylistically, Bam Bam causes issues for Jairzinho, because I don't think Jairzinho likes that dogfight that Bam Bam thrives in. So, man, I said all of that stuff about Bam Bam, just like I did on Clint's podcast. And I'm going to say what I said on his podcast, which is regardless of all that shit, I might actually end up betting Tai Tuivasa this weekend. So I'm going to see how the line goes. I'm going to see if I want to just opt for a KO play if it's a bit better, which it probably won't be that much better, or KO round 1, round 2. There may be some play I can do a little bit better than straight money line, but yeah, I'm going to marinate on it for a while and potentially play the underdog here.
Yeah, no, good luck if you do. I mean, I get the reasoning. It's just tough for me to pick. And usually if it's tough to pick, you should take a plus 180 dog. And like we already said, the recency bias mixed with the momentum of Jairzinho is why he's minus 220. It's already baked into the line. So yeah, I'm going to pick him. But I mean, like I said, would I be surprised if he got knocked out again? No. Would I be surprised if he slept Ty? No. So, it could go either way, but I'll pick Jairzinho. Now, next up in the welterweight division, we got a matchup between the Leech, Jingliang. He's 19-8, taking on Carlos Prates, who's 19-6. Currently, they got it. Carlos Prates minus 335. The comeback on the Leech, is plus 275. So this is a great fight because a lot of newer fans don't know about the Leech, James. The Leech is kind of like a hardcore fan favorite. You know what I mean? If casuals don't really know about him, but if you're a hardcore fan, you know damn well who the Leech is, man. This guy knocked out Pons. This guy knocked out Zaleski. This guy knocked out Salikov. This guy's dropped a bunch of his opponents. The Leech, one thing about the Leech is he can crack. And we were talking about how with Izzy, how the first thing that go is speed, right? And reflexes and whatnot. Well, this dude, Jingliang, doesn't rely on speed and reflexes. This guy, like we were talking about with Hendo, he's got that one hitter quitter. So this dude, you can age him 5 years, put him in his 40s, whatever. He's still going to have that disgusting power that he's always had throughout his career. Now, on the opposite side of things, though, the Leech is very susceptible to being hit. In fact, he gets dropped in a lot of his fights. He's never actually been knocked out in the UFC, but he tends to get dropped in a lot of fights and then come back and win those fights, which is interesting. But the last time, James, that Leech fought down under, I don't know if you remember, but I remember because I went big on Leech against Jake Matthews. And I truly believe, James, they run that matchup 10 times, that Leech wins a majority of them, not all 10, of course, because we saw a 30-27 by Jake Matthews. Jake Matthews didn't graze by him or edge it. Jake Matthews beat his ass, James. It was very alarming almost how easily he got, because I thought Leech was going to break this guy. When you think about their toughness historically, I'm like, dude, Leech is going to eat everything Jake Matthews has, and when it's his turn to return the favor, Jake ain't gonna like that. And Jake tooled with Leech, so that was concerning. And now he's coming off a big layoff, And prior to the layoff, the last fight with Daniel Rodriguez, all everyone talks about is how it was this big robbery. Okay, cool. You scored it for Leach, no problem. But are we going to act like that looked like prime Leach? No, it did not. He looked a step slower. So here on the other side with Carlos Prates, very good prospect. He's super long for the weight class. I mean, we're talking about a dude. It says 6'1". James, I think it's more like 6'2", 6'3". He's got a 78-inch reach, which means that he'll have a 7-inch reach advantage in this spot. And he's been compared to Anderson. And the reason why is because he kind of is slow to ease into the fight. He makes his reads. And once he does, he will snipe you like it's no one's business. I mean, we're talking about a guy in Prates, James, who has 14 knockout wins, right? Already 2 in the UFC. So when you're dealing with a guy who's only had 2 UFC fights, but he's got already 25 pro fights, this isn't one of those kids who's 6-0 that's being rushed way too fast, who's 7-1. No, this guy is ready to go into the mix right now. The issue I have, James, you know what the issue I have is? The price.
Yeah.
It's minus 350. The price is saying literally everything I just told you. So the price is accounting for the 7-inch reach advantage, the 5-year age advantage, the fact that Leach is coming off a layoff, hasn't looked quite, it's not like he looked bad, but just looked, a little bit slower than he normally is. And apparently, I don't know if this is true, hasn't he had like some kind of, I don't want to speak out of turn, is it a spinal issue, or didn't he have some kind of health concern the last 2 years? That's why he's been out. Like, did you hear about that?
I think, yeah, I did. I think someone messaged me about that in the week, actually. I can't remember though.
Yeah. So again, all this stuff is speculative, and we've been talking about narratives and all that. It really just comes down to the number. And I know there's sharp people on Li Jingliang because they feel like Carlos Prates, what has he really proved? A comeback win against Trevin Giles, and then he smoked some dude like we were talking about, the Chuck Buffalo guy. Like, what's his record? Like 8-3. Like you can compare Chuck Buffalo to those 5-0 guys I'm talking about, where they're just not ready for this level yet. But Li Jingliang has seen some stuff. He's been through some stuff. So, I mean, you can never sleep on his power, but I think that's the only chance he has in this fight, James. And I think this is a dangerous comeback fight for him. So I get the number on Leach, why people are taking the shot, but I think the favorite is going to actually be the first man to ever knock out the Leach. If not, I think he'll be one of, many to drop him, but I think he's got a good chance to be the first to knock him out, actually.
Yeah, I'm calling it as well. I'm calling him to be the first person to knock out the Leach. First time he ever gets knocked out. It's funny because a year ago or so, or 2 years ago, I called Leach to be the first person to knock out Salikov. And he was an underdog in that spot, and no one thought he would knock him out because he'd never been knocked out. But it was the first time it happened, and there's a first time for everything. And I feel like Prates probably gets his reads and does knock him out. I was reading through my Telegram messages. Someone messaged me that he had a back injury, so I actually didn't look more in depth into it. But yeah, I think he did have a back injury. He's been out for a while now. Prates is a very good fighter. Anderson Silva is a decent comparison just in the fact that he does take his time. He can get out volumed. He might lose a round because he's just waiting, for the perfect time to land. In the Giles fight, Giles was doing really well. He was landing on him, but it was only a matter of time before he was going to get caught. We've seen Giles get caught time and time again.
Can I say something real quick? Sorry to interrupt you, bro. But since you brought up Giles, and everybody's giving Prates shit for the Giles fight, dude, if you've watched a Giles fight, Giles is winning every fight until he loses. Look at his fight with Gerald Mearshart. Look at his fight. What was the Zach Cummings fight?
Michael Morales,
Dricus Du Plessis. This dude, Trevin Giles, is winning every fight until he loses. So why are you holding it against Carlos?
Yeah, it was a matter of time before he get caught. It's one of those ones where if they fought 10 times, probably knocks him out like 8 times, 9 times or something crazy like that, right? So I don't take too much from that at all, to be honest, because everyone on the Leach is saying that, because I know people on the Leach, right? They message me about the Leach. People message me every week. This is a good dog. This is a good dog. This is a good dog. And, sometimes I have discourse. Why do you think that? And everyone's saying, look, he's a good fighter, but look at the Giles fight. Look at the Giles fight. Look at the Giles fight. So, yeah, I don't take too much from that personally. But it is a massive step up in competition. And he is like the biggest favorite he's ever been. So, that's just sometimes when that happens, it's like maybe it's just better to pass if you do want to play Prates. even KO line is probably not that good. I don't know what it is, but it's probably not going to be that playable because Leach is like, he is durable, man. He gets dropped, he gets hurt, but he is durable. So, yeah, I'm picking Prates to get the win. I don't know if I'm going to play him in any regard, but I am picking him to win.
Now, next up in the heavyweight division, we got a matchup between Junior Tafa, he's 5-2, taking on Valter Walker, who's 11-1. Currently, they got it. Junior Tafa minus 135. The comeback on Valter Walker is plus 115. Interesting, James. So friend of the show, Yanni the Greek, has a max bet on Valter Walker, like a huge bet on Valter Walker. And he said that every single time Tafa has been taken down, he's lost. And then there's also the pictures floating around that it looks like Walker's in a little bit better shape. For those that don't know, this is the brother of Johnny Walker. I talked about it last time I broke down his fights, that if you're expecting, you know, flying knees and a ridiculous vertical jump and spins, and you're not going to get that. This guy fights nothing like his brother. This guy's actually the polar opposite. He's a grinder. And this is striker versus grappler. I mean, Tafa comes from that kickboxing background. We were talking about Tuivasa, how they're influenced by Mark Hunt. This is another one of those guys that's influenced by Mark Hunt. More so, James, I think Junior's brother, Justin, is like Mark Hunt, you know, like protege, whereas Junior has, you know, he's got a little bit of a different body type, but still, man, big reliance on that big left hook, elbows off the clinch breaks, big leg kicks. You just want to see guys like that get better at stuffing takedowns and getting back up from bottom, because when they do that, they're showstoppers. So what do you think, man? I mean, you think Valter Walker is going to make the, you know, proper adjustments to come out here? Because, like, a lot of people thought he might have won that fight against Brzeski, but to me, I don't care if you thought he won or he lost. It's really just about the fact he was like a big favorite in that spot. He did not cover that price tag whatsoever, even if you thought he won the fight. But that's just one fight. That's his debut. That does not mean that he can't come back better here in a second fight against the guy who can be taken down. But I will say this. A lot of people holding the Marcos Rogerio de Lima Pezao fight against Junior. I'm not. Why? Because he took it on 1 day short notice, James. His brother was supposed to fight the guy. They had a little late switch. Like, dude, this is the issue I have with dudes that, you know, they take these. It's not the people that take the short notice fights. It's the fans. So when someone takes a short notice fight, like a week notice, the fans will praise them. Wow, what a badass. This guy. Wow, BMF, this guy will take a short notice fight, step up. Yeah, big time respect. But then when they lose the fight, the fans forget about everything they said. They completely forget that the guy took the fight on short notice. Now it's all, oh, this kickboxer can't check leg kicks? Yeah. This guy must suck. It's like, dude, he wasn't even in camp. He was a pad man for his brother. He literally pulled a BMF move, stepping in on 1 day notice because his brother, I think he had like a back spasm. I don't remember what he had. Some issue. Steps in against a 265-pound grown man in Marcos. And, dude, when you saw Marcos on top of him, you saw the size difference. It made me feel like maybe Junior could drop to 205. Maybe. But all that being said, it's tough to hold a 1 day notice fight against him, especially when you're praising how much of a badass he is for taking it, and then he loses the fight. Now, all of a sudden, he sucks. Fuck that, dude. So what do you think about this matchup?
Yeah, you know, the fans do that when fighters miss weight as well. I don't think they understand how much big of an advantage missing weight is, right? So, you know, a fighter will miss weight by 4 or 5 pounds.
Chepe?
Yeah, Chepe. And then the fight will be in risk of cancellation. The other fighter will take it. All the fans are like, wow, man, he don't give a shit. Anytime, any place, he's taking the fight. And then he'll get beat, sometimes even blatantly by the weight advantage. Like Chepe kind of I don't know if it would have happened without the weight advantage, right? But like Chepe was kind of dominating him physically, right? And maybe that came down to the weight. But then the fighters are like, oh, you know, he just got dominated. He's terrible. Like they just completely forget about his opponent literally didn't cut weight.
Dude, on Friday, Damon Leach is the biggest fucking badass for accepting this fight. On Saturday, he's washed up because he lost.
Yeah, washed up. So they do the same with a lot of things. Not only that, but you know, also what they do that with as well is, and that is directly correlated to this fight, is debuts. So we know, and Daniel Zellhuber is always the greatest example of that. Because it's a recent one, right? Where Daniel Zellhuber loses his debut, but comes back and he looks great in his next fights, right? And in his debut, he underperformed. And I actually made a video like 5 years ago. I don't even know if it's still on YouTube, where I went through all top fighters that lost their UFC debut and went on to become like champions. Like there's loads of fighters.
Santos.
Yeah, Tyler Santos is one of those. I think RDA. I can't even remember them now.
Dude, RDA went like, don't quote me on it, but didn't he like go 2-4 to start his UFC career or some shit?
Yeah, maybe. Max Holloway lost quite a lot of fights back in the day as well. Carlos Condit, me personally, I lost my debut and then became an interim champion in the UFC. So anyway, you know, they do that with those. And Valter Walker looked like shit as a -300 favorite against Bretsky, right? We know that, but it was his debut. You know, maybe he performs much better this time out. It's a possibility, so we always have to remember that and just give him a pass as well. So we kind of give each fighter a pass for their last fights. Maybe not an entire pass, but at least some sort of pass. It may not represent who they actually are. So in this fight, I think it's a very volatile fight. You know, having a max bet, shout out to Gianni, it's very brave. I wouldn't, it's ballsy. I wouldn't have a max bet in this type of fight. But at the end of the day, when I had a max bet on Peyton Talbot last time out, everyone said I was crazy. Why would you max bet this type of fight? These are two up-and-coming prospects. This is not the type of fight you'd make a max bet in because they're both unproven prospects. And we saw what happened there. I had a max bet on Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje, and I said, how are you going to have a max bet on a big underdog?
You gave that out on half the battle. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I remember that. Was good shit. So, you know, you always get shit for having max bets. So I'll give Yanni shit now. I don't know why you're getting a max bet on this fight because it's volatile as shit. But if you have a read, if everything lines up with your read, fuck what everyone else says. You need to double down on it. And that's what makes us gamblers, right? You have to have the balls and you have to not give a shit about being wrong. That's just how you play the game. So, you know, I can't give too much of a detailed breakdown on this one because I don't have one. I think Valter Walker may show much better than he did in his last fight. I'm going to pick Walker. I think he gets a decision win. But Tafa's got all the finishing upside in this fight. Maybe Walker can do something on top. But, you know, from what we've seen, Walker could be winning 10 minutes of the fight and get knocked out in round 3. So it's kind of it's a tough fight to back in that regard when I think he doesn't have a lot of finishing upside. It's kind of like Mateusz Gamrot. It's hard for me to lay -300 when I think he could be winning 4 minutes of the round and then get dropped with a body kick and lose the entire round. So kind of the same thing here with Walker. But, man, the money's coming in on Tafa here. So Walker's +115. I know he's -110 a couple of days ago. If he keeps going up, I might have to go back to the well because I bet him against Bretsky, which was a horrific bet. And, you know, I hold my hand up there. It was one of the worst bets I've ever made. It's how I play the game. You know, I do lay big juice. I know a lot of people don't do that in MMA. And if you never do that, you basically will never look like an idiot. But I do play the game like that. More often than not, it works out for me. But obviously, I do lose some of these big -300, -400s that I put in parlays. And I look stupid when it happens. And I was stupid there. Terrible bet. But I may go back to the well on him this weekend if the line keeps blowing out. Even though I don't have a very strong read, I definitely have a strong read to say that I think it should be at worst down the middle at 50-50. So, you know, when you're starting to move up to +120 ranges, that's when I'm starting to look at potential bets.
Yeah, and by the way, I stand corrected on RDA. He did not start his UFC career 2-4. I just looked it up. He started his UFC career 0-2. So shout out to the legend. And look, went on to become a champion, to your point. Yeah, I mean, this fight, we know what this fight comes down to. We know exactly what this fight comes down to. Look, it's easy to say on the feet, Tafa is going to destroy this man on the ground. Walker's going to grind them out. But the case you can make for Walker having any kind of success on the feet is the threat of the takedown, potentially making Tafa a little bit gun shy, a little bit hesitant to throw. So it is tough. Like you said, Walker could grind them out for 2 rounds, get knocked out in the 3rd. I could see that happening. So yeah, tough fight to call. And when it's tough, I usually go with the underdog. And the underdog is Valter Walker. So I'll go with him +115 to kind of come back and have a better performance. But is it going to surprise me if Junior sleeps him? Not at all. Because I think Walker's going to look better than he did his last fight, I think Junior is going to look better than he did his last fight too. Like, I mean, we talk about that Gucci Mane quote. Shout out Gucci Mane from Atlanta. Hit rock bottom. You can't go but up. And there's no worse than how Valter looked his last fight. There's no worse than Junior Tafa taking on 1 day notice and getting leg kick TKO. So both these guys, I expect them to both look better. So let's see. Now, next up in the featherweight division, we got an interesting matchup between Josh Culibao. He's 11-3-1, taking on Ricardo Ramos, who's 16-6. Currently, they got it. Josh Culibao -145. The comeback on Ramos is +125. I think Ramos is the more talented guy. I think Culibao is the tougher guy. So it's easy to say that Ramos kind of quit his last 2 fights, but when I really think about it, okay, yeah, you don't often see black belts tap into, guillotines, but like the 2 guys that submitted him, Jourdain also has finished other people in the UFC with a guillotine, Lando Venata, and the last one, Julian Erosa, he actually just finished Christian Rodriguez with a guillotine too. So even though it was kind of like, dude, I thought for sure you were going to escape those, the fact that both those guys have guillotined other people in the UFC at least makes me feel like these guys must have a squeeze on them. Like Julian Erosa is like 6'1". Those dudes with those long man chokes, like, I mean, to see a guy like Christian Rodriguez quick tap, like that means that choke must have been deep, because it looked to me like Ramos was about to slip his head out of the Julian Erosa choke, and then he taps, and it's like, oh man, terrible look. But then you see, like I said, you see Julian Erosa do the same thing to Christian Rodriguez, who was on a big time run, like derailing undefeated prospect after undefeated prospect. Maybe these guys just have good squeezes on them. But yeah, it's like Ramos and his flakiness is not a new thing, James. Actually, in fact, and I've talked about this at length. So this man is now 29 years old, right? But if you go back to 2016, when he was just a kid, so you remember the show Dana White Looking for a Fight, right? Like they go to all kind of regional scenes, try to sign some prospects. So Dana sit in front row to watch this kid, Ricardo Ramos, who at the time was 8-0, James, right? And they put him in there with Manny Vasquez, who's like some kid from Alpha Male, and it seemed like a good matchup on paper for Ricardo Ramos. Manny Vasquez goes out there and chokes him out in 1:45, right? And the very next fight, he's back on Looking for a Fight, and he chokes out the kid that Sean O'Malley knocked out on Contender Series, the Alfred Kashakian guy, and then makes his UFC debut. So literally, after this guy got choked out in the first round, wins 1 fight against the same guy O'Malley knocked out, now you're in the UFC. So they wanted this guy in from the time that he was very, very young. And he's had an interesting run, man. I mean, like, you look at the guys he's lost to, and it's pretty quality opponents for the most part. I mean, we're talking about the Saeed Nurmagomedovs. We're talking about the Lerone Murphys, Zubaira Tukhugov. I know he kind of might be on his way out now, but that guy's no easy out. Jordan and Julian Erosa, they're not easy outs either. Julian Erosa is only an easy out if you knock him out early. If you do not knock out Julian Erosa early, he's a tough out. But on the other side with Josh Culibao, he kind of reminds me of like an Australian Diaz, brother. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's like skinny fat. He's extremely tough as nails. The guy goes for it. Let me take a look at his volume before I say something that's not true, because I do remember him having, kind of like not the best volume in the world. But man, he's had some opportunistic finishes along the way. And even the Sungwoo Choi fight, which somehow was a split decision, like, I remember talking to my jiu-jitsu professor about that, and he told me, man, Choi just refused to die in that fight. Like, Culibao was dropping him all over the place, and Choi just refused to die. So listen, man, Culibao's a tough guy. I think Ricardo Ramos is way better than him. I just don't think Ricardo Ramos is tougher than him. So what do you think? Is Ricardo talented enough to get past this one where he won't have to go through that adversity? Or do you think Culibao can put him in an uncomfortable spot and make him look for a way out?
Yeah, it's tough to bet on guys like Ramos because of what you mentioned. He's can be a little bit flaky in there. Maybe he makes one mistake and it leads to his demise. Whereas sometimes other fighters, they make a mistake, but they won't actually get finished. They may still stay in there. It's easy to put money on fighters like Culibao because I think he's a tough motherfucker. And I think even if sometimes the skill's not there, he's going to keep walking forward. He's going to stick in there. He's going to fight for your money. And even if he's getting outclassed like he did in the Melsick fight, he's always got outs to win, like he jumped on his back and got a submission there. And I think it's easy to bet on those type of fighters. But I think Ramos has an easy path to victory here with the back take. Now, when I say easy path to victory, I don't necessarily mean that it's easy to do this. I just mean that it's very blatant and obvious to me that it's a clear path to victory for him. Like, he definitely has outs to just take the back and grind him out or just grapple him. Because I think he's the better grappler from top position. I've seen Culibao give up his back too much. I've seen Culibao sit on his back too much. I've seen Culibao grapple too much to not think that Ramos has outs to do that here. And Ramos is very tricky on the feet. You know, he's not the worst striker either. He's got the spinning back elbows that he lands. He's got some athletic traits on the feet that could make it, you know, close at times. And then obviously he's got the grappling path to fall back on, and he's an underdog. So a clear path to victory for an underdog. Could make it tricky on the feet at times. Definitely the durability downside. Obviously the maybe the hardware and the heart and the tenacity downside. But overall, I think Ramos is a little bit better in some degrees of the fight, and I don't think he should be an underdog. I think this one is another dog or pass situation.
I agree completely. I mean, I think if this fight goes the distance, you're seeing a split decision type fight.
Yeah.
Even their stats are like almost identical, man. So like these guys are really, really well matched. And in those cases, you tend to go with the dog. It's just, we hope, you know, based off the recency bias, hopefully he doesn't, you know, pull another stunt. But like you've seen guys like Charles Oliveira quit in multiple fights, then go on insane runs. And not to compare this guy to Oliveira, but I do think Ramos is talented. I do think that he's got a lot of skills. It's just about the mental catching up with the physical. But we've also been saying that for damn near 10 years now, because that Manny Vasquez fight was, you know, 8 years ago, right? So like it's almost been a decade. Like, will he ever finally put it together? But again, the guy's not even 30 yet. So we'll see. Yeah, it won't surprise me if Culibao finds a way to break him, but I just think the way they match up is super close, and this fight should be lined probably -110 apiece. So we'll go Ramos there. Now, next up in the flyweight division, we got a matchup between Casey O'Neill. She's 9-2, taking on Luana Santos, who's 8-1 currently. They got it. Luana -155. The comeback on Casey O'Neill is +135. So, real quick, I heard people saying this is a home game for Casey O'Neill. Dude, she's from Scotland. Does she train in Australia? Do I need to be corrected here? Because like Scotland and Australia are not the same thing.
So she's definitely Scottish. She definitely has a Scottish accent. But I think she trains in Australia.
Oh, okay. Okay. That makes sense then. All right. So it is a home game if that's true.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
So what have you kind of made of Casey O'Neill? Because I've heard a lot of people say, well, there's this recency bias about how, you know, she lost her last 2 fights against, you know, good competition, and now she's being undervalued. But like, James, let's take those 2 fights aside. I don't think she looked that good against Roxanne Modafferi. I don't think she looked that good against Laura Procopio. I think she's got, you know, some scrambling ability, but I think she kind of lacks a little bit of athleticism that's going to be needed to be at the top of this division. But luckily for her, she's got another kind of green fighter in Luana, who's super young, man. Isn't Luana just a kid? Dude, Luana's 24. You know what I'm saying? Like, Luana is someone that I could see making improvements, because you see that fight with Juliana Miller, and if you just look at it on Tapology, you see it's a first-round knockout. You're like, man, you don't see that often in women's MMA. But if you watch that fight, dude, I've said it before, the striking was super ugly in that Juliana Miller fight. I don't mean Luana Santos looked ugly. I meant the striking technique looked ugly. It looked like pitter-patter. It was bad. And the next fight against Stephanie Egger, you know, she missed weight in that fight. But let me tell you this, man, that was at 35s. Next fight against Agapova, she drops back to 25s, is in the best shape of her life. And I know Agapova is on her way out, and Agapova has no business in the UFC anymore, but she treated her like that, dude. Drops her, chokes her out. I was very happy with that result, covered her price tag and then some. So now she's taking this short notice, you know, fight and flight all the way to Down Under, which, I mean, that flight takes everything out of you. I've never been to Australia, but I've been to New Zealand before, and dude, it's like a whole day of flying. But once you get there, I love New Zealand. Now we're going to go off on a tangent, because what's so beautiful about New Zealand is that, like, you can go to the beach and then you can climb up some mountains and go skiing in the snow.
Yeah.
And then what's the name of that one place in New Zealand where you get off the plane and you smell the geysers from the volcanoes?
Rotorua?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I love me some news. It's been 10 plus years and I'll never forget that place. But back to this. So O'Neal, because you look at how O'Neal was priced, right? In these last few fights, let's take a look at that. So minus 190 against Lipski, minus 175 against Jennifer Maia, minus 400 against Roxanne. So last 3 fights, these price tags have not been covered at all. But there's been a big correction now, Jam. Now she's plus 125. So do you think that maybe the market is kind of too down on her, or do you think that they've properly adjusted and realized that maybe she was a bit overhyped? How do you kind of view it? Because Luana, to me, is green, but I do think that she's developing. Like 24 years old, bro. She's just a kid, right? And she's got good attributes. She goes for it. She's tough. But again, just a kid. And then with Casey, let me take a look how old Casey is now. Oh, 26. She's a kid too. I didn't realize she was that young. Didn't she have like an ACL reconstruction recently? So yeah, I'm just kind of bothered by the kind of lack of athleticism by Casey. I always have. It's not a recency bias with the last 2 losses. I had this problem in the Roxanne Modafferi and the Laura Procopio fights too. But all that being said, how do you think they match up?
Yeah, so it's funny because I think Casey's got a lot of attributes you need to win in women's MMA, and that's the toughness, cardio, meanness, and tenacity. You know, she doesn't stop, man. She's going to keep coming forward, and a lot of women can't deal with that. You know, just in general, even men can't deal with that, right? You get these fighters who just non-stop, gritty, grindy, but we don't see it as often in women's MMA, and when you see it, you have to respect it. It's won her a lot of fights in MMA, but then when you come up against fighters who are just a lot better than you, like or have at least a big advantage in the striking, which is what we saw with Jennifer Maia. Her footwork was just too much. Casey couldn't get on the inside. I cashed Jennifer Maia there at plus 150, and then I went back to the well with Lipski at plus 180. I also played Lipski KO at plus 1,000.
And between you and me, you cashed that.
Yeah, between me and you only, not me and my bookie. I wish they felt the same. That was very close. Knocked her down, hurt her badly. Ended up getting an armbar on her. But yeah, like you said, she was big favorite in those fights, and now the line's changed. I think it is a bit of an overcorrection, honestly. But I think it does come down to if Casey O'Neal just had bad matchups, or whether she's on a bit of a downslide with her ACL. Because, you know, I know for a fact that can affect you a lot. I've done my ACL myself. I haven't had it repaired. You know, I was able to like rehab it just naturally. So I haven't had the surgery. But just even with the rehab, I know like it took me out the game for a while. And even when I was training again, it didn't feel 100%. It's all right now, but I could only imagine if I had a surgery, it would definitely not be 100%, like most things when you have a surgery. And I know my friends who have had their ACLs torn and surgery, and they're never the same, right? So is it going to be the same again? Is she just done now? Like, is her footwork going to always be a little bit messed up? Like, it's very hard to say. I think, though, she's a better striker here. She's got more UFC experience. She's fought higher level girls. She's fought, you know, decent against some of these girls that, in my opinion, would probably beat Luana Santos. And Luana Santos still has time to improve. So even if she loses this fight, she can still improve and get better. It's a hard one for me to predict. And like you've said a couple of times on this podcast, when that's the case, you look at the underdog, and Casey's an underdog. So, you know, I'll say that Casey wins the fight because I don't want to say there's value on her, but I'm picking the other fighter, like, because it's such a closely lined fight anyway. You know, I think that there is some value on Casey. Probably recency bias is playing heavily into this one because that Agapova fight was like a month ago. You know, she's turning around very, very quickly, which is, you know, a little bit strange. She didn't take any damage, but she still cut weight and stuff. So I never like it when they're just fighting back to back to back to back. Like, it's definitely not optimal for the human to fight back to back to back to back when there's weight cutting involved. And in MMA, as we know, there's usually drastic weight cutting, not just you know, Muay Thai weight cutting, right? So this is a little bit different in this sport. So yeah, I'll say there's some value on Casey O'Neal. I don't really know how I'm predicting the fight to play out, but I do know that Casey O'Neill is a better striker. And if she does keep it on the feet, she probably should win just from out voluming her and landing the better shots.
Well, when you talk about volume, that's a very good point, because you look at Casey O'Neill's fight with Roxanne Modafferi, and James, she attempted almost 400 strikes.
That's crazy.
So on one hand, you're looking at, wow, those are like Max Holloway numbers. That volume will take you far. But on the other hand, for you to throw 400 strikes and it still be a split decision.
Yeah.
But she's plus 125, James. So split decision here. Hey, you're sitting pretty win or lose, but like, it's just tough. Because I personally, like I told you, I've never, like, when everybody was hyping her up, I was never that high on her. I was always kind of on the fence. And then Santos, you know, she's everybody's favorite fighter now because of the recency bias. And look at her. She's a very good looking woman. Yeah, it's tough for me because Casey does have that volume and that tenacity, but like Luana might be tough too. Like, I know Luana gassed in that Egger fight, but that was like bantamweight and missed weight. Now she's at flyweight. She's got to be in better shape to compete at this weight class. So I'm actually leaning towards Luana, but like not confidently, because with these women's MMA fights or just close fights in general, like when you don't have a strong lean, again, you go towards the dog. But I am picking Luana here, but I mean, dude, I have no idea what's going to happen in this fight. I don't have a confident pick, anything. So best of luck if you decide to bet it. You know what I'm saying? I could legitimately see it go either way.
Yeah, and something that, you know, a lot of the viewers can take, and this is something that I kind of fucked up on when I was first betting MMA, you know, for a long time. It's like, I was always told, you know, if there's a close fight, you bet the underdog. You know, if you think it could be close, bet the underdog. And that is true. But what I found myself doing, and I don't know if anyone else can relate to this or you can relate to this, but what I found myself doing for a period of time is I didn't have a strong read on the fight. I thought it was a close fight. I couldn't pick a true winner, but that wasn't because I necessarily thought the fight was really close. It was more just because I didn't have a great read on it, right? And then I assumed, oh, I don't have a great read because it's close. But sometimes that's not the case, right? So sometimes you just don't have a good read. Doesn't mean you should play the dog because you don't have a good read and you think anything can happen. Maybe you just don't have a good read. So I guess what I'm trying to say is make sure you're not confusing not having a good read with thinking the fight is close. Because if you think the fight's going to be close, you may just not have a great read on that fight, right? So just make sure you're not confusing the two, because you can throw away a lot of money betting underdogs because you think the fight's going to be close just because you don't really know what's going to happen. If you don't know what's going to happen, if you can't lay out a path to victory very confidently for either fighter, that just means you don't have a good read. It doesn't mean the fight's necessarily going to be close. So just, you know, be aware of that one.
Yeah, 100%. Like sometimes the fans don't like it when I say, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. Well, I'm being honest with you. I'm not going to lie to you and act like, oh, this fighter who I don't
hate that, man. You have to give a pick. You're doing a breakdown. You have
I mean, look, I gave a pick, but like, I'm not going to sit here and act like, oh, this fighter is going to dominate when I don't really think that. You know what I mean? Like, I have no idea. Like, this is one of those fights. Is Chris Lee judging it? Is Adelaide Bird judging it? Do they have some local Australia judges? Australian judges tend to hate the local fighter for some reason. Like, I remember Damon, my boy Damian Beatdown Brown, always talking about how like the Australian judges are constantly fucking over the Australian fighters.
Really?
Yeah. So, yeah, I just don't know, man. And that's honesty. Like, I want to be honest. I don't want to lie to you guys and act like I'm confident when I'm not. If I'm confident, you'll know. You will know.
Yeah.
Now, next up in the featherweight division. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just said, just be patient. We'll be confident on a few fights, and that's the ones we attack.
100%, 100%. So next up in the featherweight division, we got a match between Jack Jenkins. He's 12-3, taking on Herbert Burns, who's 11-5 currently. James, they got it. Jack Jenkins. Just depends where you look. Everywhere from -800 to -950 with the comeback on Herbert, +550 to +600. I mean, we know about the leg kicking game of Jack Jenkins. It was very well noted that before he came to the UFC, he broke multiple dudes' legs on his regional scene. He's also been 5 rounds before. He's another thinking man's fighter. He's a coach as well. So he's got to see things from multiple perspectives. And like, he knows the little intricacies of the placement of those kicks to like make it more effective than usual. And let me say this will be a controversial opinion for y'all that you won't hear anywhere else. Everybody's going to disagree with me. You might even disagree with me on this. I do not think that Jack Jenkins versus what's the name of Jamal Emmer's fight was this massive robbery like everyone thinks. Listen, it's a split decision type fight. Plus 170 on a split decision was the side. The only clear round for Emmers was round 3. 1 and 2 could have gone either way. I'm not saying that Emmers should have lost or should have won. I'm just saying round 1 and round 2 were close as hell. Round 3 was the only one where I was like, yeah, Emmers definitely won that. So everybody acting like it was the biggest robbery of the century. I don't give a fuck what MMAdecisions.com said. I don't give a shit about what someone who laid minus 200 said. I watched a close fight, and going to the judges, I did not know who was going to win that fight, James. So to me, I'm going to be the only guy that says this, but plus 170 on Jenkins was the value side in that fight. It's a split decision. You take the plus 170, plus 180 all day. Jamal Emmers did not distinguish himself enough for it to be like, oh my God, that's the biggest robbery I've ever seen in my life. So I disagree with people on that. Now, that doesn't really matter here. What matters here is that Herbert Burns is super dangerous in the first round when he's fresh. His jiu-jitsu is amazing. And I think that when he first came into the UFC, man, I mean, like, dude, he went on a run, dude. Like, you saw his contender series, chokes out Derek Minner in the first round, knocks out Nate Landor in the first round of his UFC debut. I even bet on Herbert Burns in that fight. And it's funny. I bet him at like plus 115. James, that's actually a bad bet, even though he won by first round knockout, because if they ever ran it back, you know for a fact Nate Landor would drag this man through the ringer and drown him. So I got lucky, but then again, it was a different era. This was 2020, James. This was almost half a decade ago, right? And then he runs through Evan Dunham as well, but he's never been the same since the Pineda fight. I mean, the Pineda fight was a terrible look. Comes in, misses weight, gets smoked after, you know, his early grappling attempts don't work. Then the Algio fight, man, he had a damn near locked in triangle. I do not know to this day how Algio survived. Algio did survive. Herbert had nothing left, did not have, you know, a second attempt or a second win. And then Julio Arce, more of the same, comes out hard in that first round and, you know, eventually, succumb to a second round stoppage, which has been the case the last 3 fights. Listen, man, Herbert Burns, like, has Jack ever been submitted? He has. Yes, he has twice, actually, but 2018, 2017. So, and it was like his 4th and 5th ever pro fight. So this man's come a long way since then. Now, this is his 15th fight or something like that. So 15th or 16th. I mean, Herbert, while he's fresh, if he takes your back or has something locked in on you, I mean, if I'm parlaying Jenkins at this big price, I'm going to sweat my fucking balls off if Herbert Burns takes his back. But besides that, Herbert Burns is going to get picked apart and either lose a decision, get leg kick TKO, get knocked out, whatever the case may be. I think Jack Jenkins buries this man probably late second, early third. Maybe hey, James, maybe a first round at this point. Who knows? But the thing is, Jenkins takes his time to kind of get into the fight. Like, you watch his fight with Don Shanis, where I actually literally, James, I laid minus 300 on Jenkins straight.
Good bet.
Yeah, against Don Shanis. I was like, this guy, no disrespect to Shanis, but I knew Shanis had no business in the UFC. And like, that fight, clear 30-27, almost breaks his leg too. But the reason I'm bringing that fight up, not to impress you with the bet, but to impress upon you that even against a lower level guy like Shanis, Jenkins still takes his time and he's still like committed to his process. So he's not going to come out here and just hunt for a knockout. He's going to try to chop you down systematically. If you quit on Jenkins, he will go ahead and show you the door. But if you're tough enough to hang around, you can lose a 30-27, 30-26 is what I'm trying to say. So it's really up to if Herbert is tough enough to go all 3 with him or not.
Yeah, I definitely don't think he's tough enough to go all 3. Just at this point in his career, like, he gasses out too hard, man. And, you know, Jack's got late finishes before, and I think he's going to get another one here. I don't think it's going to come round 1 because, like you said, he does take some time to get into it. I don't have some groundbreaking shit to say here. He's the biggest favorite on the card. He's minus 800. I agree with him being a massive favorite. I think he's going to get a round 2 finish. Herbert's been finished in round 2 like 10 times in a row or something crazy like that. And, you know, all right, like 3 or 4 times in a row. And I think it's going to happen again. I don't think it's going to come in 1. Probably not 3. Probably 2. 2 or 3, I would say. And I might even play 2 or 3 because it's a decent plus money. So I might end up playing that.
Dude, I feel like hypothetically, I feel for the people that lay the under 1.5 at dog money, and like he finishes him at like 2 minutes and 35 seconds in the
Yeah,
round
I
two.
think that's when it's going to be, honestly. So that's why I'm not doing the under 1.5. Obviously, I thought about the under 1.5 because you do cover in the Herbert sub, and like at the end of the day, Herbert is dangerous enough to randomly get another submission or maybe not a knockout. I know he did that against Landwehr, but he is dangerous enough to get a random submission at some point. And then obviously Jack is good enough to and Herbert is flaky enough to get finished in round 1, but I feel like it comes like 2 minutes 40 or something crazy like that. So I'm not going to be playing under 1.5. I don't want to get burned. Or if you do play that under 1.5, what I will say is also play Jack round 2. This is an angle that I used to play. I remember specifically cashing it on Cyril Gane versus Junior dos Santos, where I played the over 1.5, but I also played the round 2 Cyril Gane. And what that does is you can cash both, but you also save yourself if it comes early in round 2. You can do the exact same on the reverse. So you can play the under 1.5, but also play Jack round 2. So if it goes over 1.5, Jack could still finish him. You still profit. And if it goes under 1.5, but it stays in round 2 and he finishes him, you cash both. So, that's a little angle I used to play ever so often. I haven't done it in a while, but, this is definitely a fight where you could do it in, depending on if you think it's going to go over and under. I would just make sure you play the round 2 as well, because I really do think it's going to come in round 2.
Yeah, listen, man. Being 36 years old at featherweight is a scary place to be. I mean, in Herbert's prime, he beat some real dudes. He beat that Timofey guy that knocked out Eddie Alvarez. But James, that was in 2015. We're approaching a decade. So, fight game is brutal, my man. Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got a matchup between Tom Nolan, he's 7-1, taking on Alex Reyes, who's 13-4. Currently, they got it. Tom Nolan minus 1,500, James. The comeback on Alex Reyes is plus 850. You got to lay $3K to win $200 on Tom Nolan here. Now, good friend of the show, Pepe, who was the 2023 handicapper of the year, in my opinion, he said that this was predatory matchmaking by the UFC. He tweeted that. I mean, I get it, but like when Tom Nolan's 1-1 in the UFC, he's been dropped in both of his fights. Like, it's like with Alex Reyes, when you're dealing with someone who just doesn't belong, who's fought twice in 7 years or some shit like that. It's like, okay, you feel bad for him because he's had all those health issues. He couldn't get himself right. So we're just giving him this fight just because we don't want to release him. He's still got some fights left. We could release him, but I feel bad for this guy. Let him make another 10K. But it's like, how much lower can you go, dude? Like, are we supposed to do AJ Cunningham versus Alex Reyes? The issue is, James, we don't want to get Alex Reyes or AJ Cunningham wins. We want to get them both off the roster. We want to get our prospects wins over these guys that don't belong. And Tom Nolan, listen, he's so green, but he's got some attributes that potentially down the line could translate to something. The guy is 6'3" at 155 pounds. I mean, people might not remember James Vick. Like, they might remember now that, he's way past his prime, got knocked out a bunch of fights. But when James Vick first came into the UFC, he was 9-1 at 155 pounds. He was the 6'3" guy. And this guy here, Tom Nolan, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if like down the line, he made it to the top 15 like Vick did, kind of had the tall man game at lightweight, but he needs a lot of work. He needs a lot of seasoning. And that's why they're giving him this guy, Alex Reyes. Like, you've been dropped your first 2 UFC fights, almost knocked out in both of them. Like, there's not much more seasoning we can give you than a guy like Alex Reyes, who, all respect to Reyes, because he's been through so many like physical issues. I think he had like a spine issue. He almost died. And I know that I've heard interviews with him. He seems like a truly nice guy, and he's got students. He cares about them. So like, as just a person, Alex Reyes seems like a really nice guy, and I wouldn't mind seeing him get a knockout here, because I'm not laying no minus 1,500 on Tom Nolan. So just as a fan, it'd be cool to see like this guy have his feel good moment. But do I predict it to happen? No, I think Tom Nolan's going to knock him out in the first round.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is a massive, massive favorite, even bigger than Jack Jenkins, which is crazy when he's sitting at that minus 900. But I completely agree with you. I don't have too much more to add, bro. I think Nolan's a good fighter, to be honest. I know he's shown some lapses in his defense and dropped the ball a little bit, but I do think he's a good fighter. He reminds me of Sam Patterson. I don't know why. I think maybe because they got knocked out early as big favorites. One's English, one's Australian. You know, there's some affinity there. They're two tall, lanky white dudes. Like maybe that's the reason.
His grappling ain't on Patterson's level, but I see the tall man defense for sure.
Yeah, the tall man defense, knockout early. They're both lanky for their weight class. They're both came off the Contender Series. Just got in the UFC recently. Maybe that's why I always get them guys mixed up. But yeah, I think this is kind of similar to Sam Patterson's last fight, where they're like, okay, you dropped the ball. We're giving you a win against one of the worst fighters in the division now. So yeah, the comparisons keep going on. He was a massive favorite there. He got a first-round finish. I think this guy's going to get a first-round finish as well. It's just going to be the knockout instead of the submission.
Now, next up in the welterweight division, we got a matchup between Kenan Song, he's 21-8, welcoming Ricky Glenn to the welterweight division, who's 22-8. And for the record, this is not just Ricky Glenn's welterweight debut. I believe it's his welterweight like MMA debut. Like, I don't think that he's even fought at welterweight on the regional scene, maybe like back 10 plus years ago. But I've been watching Ricky Glenn's career for years, man, back in the World Series of Fighting days. This guy was a featherweight, but he was a 6'1" featherweight. So him moving up to 70, I'll mention the odds here in a sec. Him moving up to 70, I don't think it's a bad move. Like, I think, oh, you finally don't have to kill yourself to make 55 or 45. Like, dude, you're going to be able to breathe a little bit. But has he taken too much damage to where it doesn't even matter? All right, so the odds, currently they got it. Kenan Song, -170. The comeback on Ricky Glenn is +145. Here's my issue with Kenan Song. You know damn well what my issue with Kenan Song is. The guy has absolutely no volume whatsoever, but he does crack. One thing about Kenan, he hits very, very hard. Like, we talked about this throughout the show, how these guys, power's the last thing to go, man. So Kenan can be 40 years old and he can still have that one hitter quitter. But besides that, what else does he got? Not really too much else, bro. And Ricky Glenn is not bad. Ricky Glenn just might be washed. But like Ricky Glenn's prime, if he was moving up to 70s, I'd take the shot here. Yeah. And I'm not convinced he loses this. It's just those last two fights were bad looks. But again, was he just killing himself? Because 15 pounds is a lot, James. And we're not talking about just 15 pounds of walking weight. We're talking about the 15 pounds of water in your body and brain from cutting weight, you know? So his walking weight has probably gone up now. He's feeling a lot better. But how many fights does Ricky Glenn have? He's holy shit. 32 pro fights that we know of, James, that we know of. This is one of those guys that he probably has a bunch of fights that aren't even on his record. He's one of those guys, right? Like I said, dude, I think I had Ricky Glenn on Half the Battle like maybe 8 years ago. You know, like, nice. So all respect for him. It's just, do you think this weight class is going to rejuvenate him, or is it like this is your last UFC fight and it doesn't matter how bad Kenan Song is, one touch on the chin and that's probably it? Like, what do you think, man?
Yeah. So I was going back and forth yesterday with Clint about this, and I was like, kind of said what you said, man. Like, look, Ricky, he's not a bad fighter at all. You know, he's a decent fighter. It's just lately he's looked washed, and even for a while. And then he took a long time off as well. And then he came back and he got an early finish, and everyone thought he was back. And then actually, you know, his fights after that have shown that maybe he isn't back. I think that over a 15-minute fight, he's probably going to get punched in the face a couple of times at least. And I do think that he's going to get hurt from those. So the thing about it is, like, you know, Kenan Song, he doesn't really push any type of pace. You know, he doesn't have high volume. He's not really stalking you and trying to smash you. He usually lands on people when they're trying to close range on him. Like even against Ian Gary. Ian Gary's outside kickboxing fighter, but you know, when Kenan hurt him, it was kind of like off a counter, you know, when Gary was like pressuring him. Same thing with Rolando Bedoya, you know, Bedoya was walking forward into range and then he got caught. Ricky Glenn might not even walk into range. He might just stay on the outside and throw kicks, and like what he was doing against Drew Dober, he might not want to engage. And Drew Dober is the type of fight he's going to stalk you, walk you down, and he's going to hunt you. But Song's not going to do that. So this is a weird ass fight for me. I could see it being some like low volume, outside, boring kickboxing affair where not much happens. But I could also see Song hitting him once and him going down. So yeah, I think Song should be the favorite. He's the bigger guy. He's the better guy at this point in his career. He's more durable and he hits harder. So yeah, I'm going to pick Song to win.
You know what's interesting is that Ricky had never been knocked out until his last two fights. Like he literally went
Crazy.
an entire career until the last two fights. Now, was it a case where, listen, Drew Dober can crack? Christos Giago's not the best fighter, but he does hit hard. I mean, he rocked Zell Huber too. Like Giago's, Giago's got on top of Arman Sarukian like in the first 30 seconds of their fight too. Like it's like we were talking about with Trevin Giles, like where like certain dudes, they might not win fights, but like they'll have big moments.
Gargos always round one. Gargos is a fucking beast, man.
Yeah. So it's not like he got knocked out by two soft hitters. He got knocked out by the guy with the second most knockouts in lightweight history, and by Giagos, who isn't very good but cracks. Now, how old is Ricky at this point? Let's take a look. So Ricky
37, I think.
35.
Oh, okay.
So
not bad.
And he just turned 35. So and at least he's at 70s now, because featherweight and 55s, forget about it. Like those days are behind you. Even you win or lose, those days are completely behind you. Like if you still want to fight, it's got to be 170 or up. It's just a matter of, is he going to look rejuvenated, or is it just, last UFC fight? Yeah, tough to say, bro. I mean, I'll lean with Kenan, but it's more recency bias than anything. Like Kenan's not a guy I like picking, let alone at chalk. Like when Kenan doesn't knock you out, Kenan doesn't look that good. Like the Bedoya fight, Bedoya outlanded him by a significant margin, but Kenan had like a couple key moments in that fight. So, yeah.
Like skill for skill, Glenn is the side all day here.
Glenn's better.
It's just like in his last fight, he looked really bad, man. I know it's Doba, but it wasn't even that. It was like he was looking scared. He didn't engage from the off. He was backing away the whole fight without even being hit. When he got hit, every time he got hit, he got wobbled. I know Doba hits hard, but it was like every single shot, man. Like it wasn't. Maybe just had an off night, but then he is 35. He took a long time off, and the fight before that, he got knocked out. And it's like it all compounds. And obviously, it is recency bias, but sometimes recency bias is a thing, right? Like there was recency bias because you've been getting beat up the last two fights. It actually means something. We can't completely ignore it, but sometimes these fucking fighters look terrible for two fights and then go on a 3-fight winning streak. It's very, very strange MMA, man. So at the end of the day, Dan, all we're doing is guessing. My guess is that he is kind of done and Kenan's going to beat him, but fuck, my guess could be wrong, bro.
Right. And last but not least, in the flyweight division, we got the newcomer, Stewart Nicoll. He's 8-0, taking on Jesus Aguilar, who's 10-2. Currently, they got it. Stewart Nicoll, minus 230 to come back on Jesus Aguilar's plus 195. So Stewart Nicoll, or as I like to say, Stuart Little. You seen that little mouse, Stuart Little? Like,
yeah. Cool.
That's what this guy reminds me of, dude.
I know, bro. He looks like a jacked fucking animal, Stuart Little.
So this Stewart Nicoll guy, so I actually heard everybody's breakdowns up until this point before I checked out Stuart Little's like tape. So everyone was talking about
what were they saying?
That
I haven't heard any breakdowns. What were people saying?
That he's this amazing black belt and like his ground game is stupid good and all this stuff. I don't know, bro. Like so when I heard that, I was expecting, oh shit, we're gonna get the new flyweight this, the new flyweight that, the new Erceg. No. Like the issue though is that Jesus Aguilar is basically guillotine or bust. And I'm a huge fan of the guillotine. I'm a front choke guy myself. I love guillotines. I love good guillotines. And Jesus Aguilar, he's got big balls for a little dude. First of all, they list him at 5'4". James, this guy's like 5'2", and he's got a 62-inch reach. Like this guy is tiny, man. But I respect him. He's got balls, but there's no atom weight division and there's no straw weight men's division. For a fact this guy on the smaller side for flyweight. Like these flyweights coming up now, dude, are fucking like, you see what Tagir looks like?
Yeah,
like you compare Tagir to Stuart Little and Jesus, it's like Tagir looks like 2 weight classes above both these guys. But so I was expecting Stuart Little to be some jiu-jitsu guy, but he actually comes out and he bangs a little bit. His striking ain't that bad. What I have an issue with is his wrestling. His entries are very, very ugly. He telegraphs them from a mile away. So there's that. But once he actually does get to the ground, he's not bad at all. And that's where I see that black belt coming into play. Here's my issue with Jesus, bro. Have you seen Jesus's stats? They're absolutely horrendous. Minus the defensive stats. Okay. Like he only absorbs 1.1 strikes per minute, which you're like, oh shit, like this guy doesn't get hit. That's fucking awesome. So what does he land? No, he lands less than 2 strikes per minute, dude. That's terrible. What's his takedown defense? Because you're going up against this this black belt. His takedown defense is 40%, my man. So I really do think it's guillotine or bust. Like, people are going to mention, how is it guillotine or bust if the 2 fights he's won in the UFC were by decision and by KO? Those aren't guillotines. Dude, Shannon Ross has no chin whatsoever. He treated Shannon Ross like Shannon Ross. Respect. But that's the only knockout on Jesus Aguilar's entire career, right? And then the next fight against Mendonça, hey, man, I mean, respect for getting that win. But number one, that was in Mexico. Number two, a lot of people thought that might have been one of the bigger kind of questionable head-scratching decisions we've seen in a while. So I'm not trying to discredit his 2-fight run, but I'm just saying you got to put context into it and don't let that fool you from who this man truly is. But how they match up, I mean, Stewart's going to try to shoot on this guy. Jesus is going to try to guillotine him. And if he does not guillotine him, he's going to be put on his back. And from there, I think Stuart Little is going to take over this fight. Now, whether he submits him or not, that remains to be seen. Yeah. But ultimately, look, there will be a time to face Stewart. I am telling you this right now. But when I looked into Jesus, he just doesn't do enough for me, man. And it's not like Stewart is susceptible to the guillotine either. So I think he'll be, aware of it, hand fight, get on top, grind him out, or submit him. So I'll go Stuart Little here for the dub.
Yeah, I like Stewart as well. I don't think he's this crazy black belt, but I do think what he does have, like, when I look at him, I don't see him and go, wow, man, this guy's fucking, this black belt's crazy, super high level jiu-jitsu guy. What I see is a hell of a lot of tenacity, great cardio, really, really tough, and very, very strong and physical. And I think those things take you potentially even farther than having a really high level black belt, because you can be the highest level black belt in the world. I mean, it's like every single week I tune into Bellator and I see these Gracie dudes who go like 1-3 in Bellator, but they're meant to be like the best black belts in the world. So, this is an MMA fight. And I do think Nicoll has a very good grappling game for MMA. I don't think he's super slick with the grappling transitions and, something like I've seen him falling off the back sometimes and stuff like that. And you don't see these high-level black belts fall off the back. Charles Oliveira doesn't fall off the back and stuff. It doesn't happen, right? But I honestly do think Nicoll is a good fighter. I think he's got a style that can go far in the flyweight division. The thing about the flyweight division is, like, it's hard to grapple people. We don't see it too often. It's hard to control people, I should say. Yeah, you can take them down, but it's hard to keep them down. So when you get these fighters who are really like, that's their style, like, we wouldn't really get a Khabib in the flyweight division just because these guys are too scrambly, man. You can't keep them down. So maybe that will stunt his growth a little bit or halt his potential. But honestly, I think he can go far in the UFC, man. But Aguilar's not an easy fight. Aguilar's a tough fight because he's a dog himself. I think he's tough himself. He's got good cardio himself. He's not going to give up on himself. But yeah, I think this is, like, I've seen him taken down too many times. I've seen him held on bottom too many times. I've seen him give up too much control time, lose too many minutes by staying on the ground. That's exactly what Nicoll's going to do. I think Nicoll's going to do well in this fight, and I think he's going to do well in the UFC.
Before I let you go, we got to talk about the fight to watch and the fighter to watch. So, James Blissett, lucrative MMA. In your opinion, what is the fight to watch for UFC 305?
It's got to be Valter Walker versus... Nah, I'm only joking. That's definitely not the fight to watch. That's not the fight to watch. We need a new segment. Not the fight to watch. That's Valter Walker and Junior Tafa. The fight to watch for me, I'm just looking at the card right now. What's the other one? I forgot. Fight to watch and the fighter to watch.
Yeah, but first give me the fight, and then I'll give you my fight.
Bro, I'm going to have to say the main event, man. I'm not going to try and be hipster for no reason. The main event is the fight to watch, bro. Like, Africa versus Africa. We haven't had that in the UFC before, I don't think, not for a title. Dricus Du Plessis versus Adesanya, one of the greatest middleweight fighters of all time, taking on someone who was counted out at every step. They said he was the worst fighter ever. He's never going to go far. all the cappers try to fade him every single fight, and he ended up winning the title. You know, not just winning lots of fights, but winning the title. So I think that's a fucking banger of a fight. I can't wait for it at all.
For sure. I mean, that's obviously the fight to watch. But besides that, I'm going to go with Carlos Prates versus Jingliang. You're dealing with two knockout artists, one that's established in the Leech and the other one that's emerging in Carlos Prates. And between the two of them, James, they got 24 combined knockouts. So either someone's going to hit the deck or these two are going to stand and bang for 3 straight rounds and get a fight of the night. And for that reason, that's my fight to watch. Now, James, who is your fighter to watch for UFC 305?
You might not like this one, but I'm going to go with Stewart Little. First fight of the night for this one, last fight of the night for my last one. I do think he can go far in the UFC. You know, he's fought mainly cans, so I could be wrong here. Maybe the skills don't translate. I said yesterday on Clint's podcast that it's hard to judge skill sets when they've been fighting cans because it could just be that one step up, they look shit. But personally, I think Stewart Little can go far, man. So, yeah. I think making his debut, you've never seen him before. I think he's the fighter to watch.
I'm going to go with another Aussie as well. I'm going to go with Steve Erceg. Listen, this is a guy that is massively hyped up. This is a guy, if you go on MMA decisions right now, people scored that fight against Pantoja for Erceg. There's a 49-46 card for Erceg on MMA decisions right now if you go there. So people are acting like this guy is the heir to the throne, is the next this, the next that. And I got to give him credit. I mean, he's a damn big flyweight. And like to come in only 3 fights deep, have that competitive fight with Pantoja, and now you got a top 5 guy that's established in Kai France. I mean, he wins this fight. It might only take another win or 2 to get him back to a title shot, but he loses this fight. It depends how he loses. Is it competitive back and forth? Okay, you clearly belong. Does Kai outclass you? Then you're like, then you're having second thoughts about Erceg's entire trajectory. But I think Erceg is super talented, and there's a reason that people have been paying attention to him. And for that reason, in the co-main event, he is my fighter to watch because this is a real test he has in front of him with Kai. Let's see how he deals with it. I actually think this is the toughest test of his career besides Pantoja. I think that Kai is a tougher out than the first 3 guys that I was about to say Stewart, that Steve Erceg has fought. So for that reason, Erceg's my fighter to watch. I will definitely be paying attention to see what he does. Now, James, thank you so much for joining me on this special edition of Half the Battle. Fans can follow you at Lucrative James and also Lucrative MMA. Anything else you want to tell the fans before we get out of here?
Nah, bro. Thanks for having me on. As I always say, bro, you're an OG of the game, man. You know, all the viewers, shout out to Dan, respect Dan, because if Dan weren't doing it, whoever your favorite content creator or capper is, if it ain't Dan, they probably wouldn't be doing it either, man. So, you know, that I don't shout out random cappers. I rarely do it, to be honest. Only people I actually respect, only people I actually have something worth saying about. And that's why I always do it with guys like you and Cody Saftich and anyone else like that, because OGs of the game, you know, that's the reason I got involved in it, bro. So thanks again for having me on your platform. Used to listen to you back in the day. Now I'm on your platform. So, you know, it's always a privilege and it's always a pleasure doing it, bro. So hopefully we cash. We both like a couple of the same dogs this weekend, so it might be a good weekend for both of us.
Well, I sincerely appreciate the kind words from you and from all the fans. Thank you all so much. Please smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, share if you feel inclined, leave me a comment. And I look forward to the fights this weekend. I hope you guys enjoy Contender Series. I hope you guys have an amazing week. And until the next time, let's cash these bets.